Okay, card number 3. We're going to do a card in portrait, not landscape. And this time it's going to be a bit more of a painterly experience. So you need some green watercolour and some blue and some brown. You can do this in acrylic, in ink, pastel, whatever you want. I've got another piece of card. Let me just zoom out a little bit so you can see a bit better. I've got another piece of card here which fits the right hand side of my card again, and I'm going to cut out a rough hillside as a stencil. So you can draw it on if you want, but it's going to look a bit like that for me. Alright, so just cut along that line with a pair of scissors. Doesn't have to be exactly like mine, you know, it really doesn't matter what shape it is. And I'm just going to stick that onto my card using a bit of tape. Oops. Make sure you don't go over that tall. Let's just lift it off again. Stick it a bit further down, like that. There we go. You don't want it to move. And we're going to paint some trees above it. Again, you can draw the trees on if you want to, but I'm going to use freehand. So you can just copy what I'm doing. Again, if your trees turn out different shapes, it really doesn't matter. First of all, I'm going to turn the card this way. Hope you can see that. And zoom in a bit, like that. And I'm going to draw a few uprights using my paintbrush. And I'm going to use a brown colour to do that with, because these are going to be the trunks of your trees. So if we make them sort of a brown colour, then that would be good. So we're going to have one tree about here, like that. Like I said, I'm using a rigger brush. You can use a detailed brush, but as long as it's got a really nice point on it, make sure it's got a point on it, because otherwise you end up with a real stubby end to your trees. Now another one there. Another one there, and then we're going to have a small one just popping up there. Try and keep your lines straight if you can, not like the one I just did there. Another one there that's quite tall, and another one just at the back of it like that. Okay. Then we're going to turn our cards back into the portrait mode, and we're going to use some greens. So I've got sap green, Windsor green, Viridian, olive, all sorts of different greens here. You want to go for the more sort of inky colours. You can do this with a rigger brush. You can do it with other types of brushes as well. So I'll show you how to do it with the different types. So keep the card on, and what you're going to do is you're just going to start above the tree, and you're going to just use a really nervous hand like this until you get to the bottom. Going to pick up a little bit more paint. Make the marks at the bottom wider than the ones towards the top, and leave them quite loose like that. Yeah, did you see how to do that? If you've got shaky hands already, you're laughing. I'm going to use a different green on the next one. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to start at the bottom at this time, and I'm just going to roughly go up and down this structure like that, really rough. And the next one I'm going to do is going to be have some blue in it. So it's a green with some dark blue in it, just to make it a bit stronger and a bit more colourful so that it stands forward. So again, you can start at the top if you want, make them different, have some little twigs sort of poking out. You don't have to cover the whole area. You can have a break in the tree, because not all trees are full of leaf. Sorry, it just knocked the camera. Again, work down to the bottom and make sure that you go across your stencil, because otherwise it won't look right. You can do some sort of little bits poking out like that. Okay, we're going to repeat that with the other trees. So let's start with this green. Make them all different, right? So I've gone into sort of a curvy shape with this one because I want it to be different to the others. Flick outwards with some of your marks. So go from the centre and flick out like that. Into the next green, which was a Windsor green, I think. And I'm going to start at the top with this one. I'm going to have some really, because this is a really big one, I want to make this extra special. Flick outwards, so start at the centre, keep filling your brushes up and flick outwards like that. Make sure some of your lines come down, because if you start on the outside and flick inwards, you end up with marks like that one, which is stumpy on the edges. So, you know, just be aware of that, especially if you're right-handed and you work into the left-hand side. You want to be, I quite like that, like it is. I think I'll bring some of those marks out though, over that tree. I should have done that one first and then that one. That was my mistake, but doesn't matter. We'll manage. So we'll put this have fun with it. There. Okay, so that's the first stage. I'm going to dry it off quickly. Okay, let's peel this off. So we're just going to lift carefully these, make sure you've got clean hands, off. And what you get left with is a nice line which sort of looks a bit like snow. Hopefully that looks like snow to you. Yes? So that's great. Let me just zoom in a bit so you can see. Alright. It's a really nice technique, and you can do it in multiple layers if you want to. So the next bit is to almost repeat the same thing but using the foreground trees. So same brown. I'm going to turn, I'm not going to do too many, I'm going to turn this into horizontal landscape mode again. I'm just going to put a branch up there, and then I'm going to put another one over here about there, but it'll only be small. Now because you can see the base of these, we're just going to put a little bit of a break at the bottom of this trunk here, like that. Okay, so again, choose some colours. I'm going to use that really lovely inky blue colour that I made. Turn your paper around again and repeat the exercise. So this is going off the edge here. You can paint over the edge, it's quite nice that actually, but just put in some of those extra marks. Again, use a nervous hand, plenty of paint, and you can afford to be a bit thicker because this tree is more in the foreground. You can afford to be a bit thicker with your mark making, so you could, if you wanted, use a bigger brush. So let's try using a slightly bigger brush. So we've got a more rounded brush here. Let's pick up some of that paint that we used in there, and we can just put in some more defined marks on this particular tree. You can also work in some extra marks there like that. Okay, same with the other one. Again, work from centre outwards so you don't get stubby marks if you can. Work a bit thicker. Use a slightly different mark making method like I'm doing here. Use different directional marks so that it doesn't get boring. Very easy to do that. And hopefully you'll end up with something that you like. And there's no reason why you can't go back in with your rigger, because you've got plenty of paint on there, and just use your rigger brush just to sort of fine line some marks coming out of those branches like that. The more the more variety you've got in your mark making, and that comes from using different brushes, different tones of paint. Okay, there we go. So that's our trees done, and now we're just going to put fence in. Now you can do this again, you can do it freehand if you want to, but if you don't and you're not sure of how steady you'll be, then draw it with a pencil. So we've got a post coming down here, quite large, and then another post here, and then it's going to go into the distance like this and slightly tail off as it's going away. And this time we're going to use the same stencil, just check that it's not wet underneath, and put that stencil back down, but put it at a slightly different angle to what you had it before, like that. Oops, you can't see that. Can you see? I've just tilted the angle over like so, and then you can paint your fence in. So I'm going to come down from here. Actually, I'm not going to, I might use my rigger brush, but I want to use the other brush to begin with. So this is the small round brush that I was talking about. I'm just going to dip it in some of that burnt umber. You can use whatever colour you want. You can jazz it up and put different shades on this fence post. Remember to sort of tail it off as it's going away, so you get some feeling of perspective. Smaller marks, okay, and then just join them up with the fine section of the tip of your brush. Okay, and you can put a double fence in if you want. You can leave it unexposed, so it looks like it's sort of being covered by the snow, like that, and then lift it off. Now if you want to make those posts thicker and more rustic, then just draw a little edge, fill it in. You don't need to be massively fussy about it. They come thinner as they're going away from you. Just remember that perspective. Same with these marks as well that are going across. They need to be slightly thicker in the foreground than they are when they go away from you. And then pull the stencil off, and there you have it. You've got your main scene, wintry woodland scene. Now you can pop some birds in if you want to, but we're just going to do a final thing, which is to put some shadow in. Now your shadow colour should be a purple tone, and you get that by mixing ultramarine with alizarin crimson, and then it should be a shadow of whatever object is casting the shadow. So if you mix your purple up and then you add, so this is green, I'm going to add a tiny bit of green into the mix. So let me just show you that on my palette. Oops. So I've got a bit of purple. Now I've got purple mixed already. If you haven't got purple, alizarin crimson, dark red with dark blue, which is ultramarine, mixed together to get a purple. And then add a little bit of the green in. So whatever green you've used for your tree, just put that in and you end up with that sort of colour. Alright, now you don't want it too dark, so add plenty of water to it. And then what you're doing is, if you're imagining that the light is coming from the left, right, and that the shadows are coming off the trees to the right hand side. So let me just see if that's a nice colour or not. Just put a touch down and then just break it up. Doesn't have to be loads. Go in thin with it to begin with, so at least you know that you can sort of change things if you need to. So just the suggestion of a shadow coming off these trees. Make sure you don't do solid forms, because it wouldn't be like that. It needs to be quite broken, like this, coming off. Make sure the underneath of those trees is okay. And again, don't forget these ones over here. Okay, and then also just underneath the fence posts, and maybe you can just put a slight suggestion of some lines coming in as well. Okay, so that's a really lovely card. You can take some white gouache or white acrylic and put some snow on these tips of the, or you can use a Posca pen again. Let me just get this going. We use these Posca pens all the time, especially with watercolour, but they do need a good shake. And make sure that your drawing is nice and dry before you put these on, so you can do sort of little flecks of snow coming down like that. And another nice thing to do, you must also put it on the tops of the wire that's going across, and you can even put it on the tips of, put it on the tips of the trees. Another nice thing to do is to flick gouache. So if you mix up some gouache and you use a toothbrush and just flick with the toothbrush, and that will put some snow on there. Okay, but I'm happy with that as it is. I don't want to make it any more than what it is. So I'm just going to fold it. This is still wet, so I'm being careful. And I'll stand it up so that you can see. If I just zoom back here, so you can see the card now. Okay, so there's the finished card. Again, if you want to enhance it, let me just go back. Up we go. If you want to enhance it, then do so. You can put a little sleigh or some, I don't know, some pheasants, some birds, some children playing, but I like that as it is. I like the simplicity of it. Don't overdo it. Okay, so that's card number 3 finished. So you've got Christmas trees, baubles, and a nice winter scene.